If it wasn't for the Most High who was on my side, man, ain't no telling where I'd be.
Mr. Wilson would've known.
Can't nobody tell me nothing different. The Father's been good to me.
So good to me.
Yeah. Wave your hands if you feel me. I'm a witness. Yahweh's been good to me.
So good to me.
Every morning that I rise, I thank Yahweh that I'm living. Keep my enemies at bay and never leave without my fringes. 1611 with me cause I'm on a mission. Talking sheep, I pay the cost, me and my lines really live it. I don't need no glory, you don't have to know my story. Glad I made it out this world cause this world was never for me. I thought that I was. If it wasn't for the Most High who was on my side, man, ain't no telling where I'd be.
Mr. Wilson would've known.
Can't nobody tell me nothing different. The Father's been good to me.
So good to me.
Yeah. Wave your hands if you feel me. I'm a witness. Yahweh's been good to me.
So good to me.
Every morning that I rise, I thank Yahweh that I'm living. Keep my enemies at bay and never leave without my fringes. 1611 with me cause I'm on a mission. Talking sheep, I pay the cost, me and my lines really live it. I don't need no glory, you don't have to know my story. Glad I made it out this world cause this world was never for me. I thought that I was. If it wasn't for the Most High who was on my side, man, ain't no telling where I'd be.
Mr. Wilson would've known.
Can't nobody tell me nothing different. The Father's been good to me.
So good to me.
Yeah. Wave your hands if you feel me. I'm a witness. Yahweh's been good to me.
So good to me.
Every morning that I rise, I thank Yahweh that I'm living. Keep my enemies at bay and never leave without my fringes. 1611 with me cause I'm on a mission. Talking sheep, I pay the cost, me and my lines really live it. I don't need no glory, you don't have to know my story. Glad I made it out this world cause this world was never for me. I thought that I was. If it wasn't for the Most High who was on my side, man, ain't no telling where I'd be.
Mr. Wilson would've known.
Can't nobody tell me nothing different. The Father's been good to me.
So good to me.
Yeah. Wave your hands if you feel me. I'm a witness. Yahweh's been good to me.
So good to me.
Every morning that I rise, I thank Yahweh that I'm living. Keep my enemies at bay and never leave without my fringes. 1611 with me cause I'm on a mission. Talking sheep, I pay the cost, me and my lines really live it.
Shalom, shalom, Israel. Welcome back to another edition of World History according to the Bible. Tonight's lesson is the creation of the Jewish race. Creation of the Jewish race. So let's open up with the scripture. Let's open up with Revelation 2 and 9. Revelation chapter 2 and verse 9. Revelation 2 and 9. I know thy works and tribulation and poverty. So this is in red writing, right? This is Christ speaking. He says, I know thy works, speaking to Israel, right? And tribulation. So he knows the things that we have to do. He knows the work that he himself performed when he walked this earth, right? And he knows the work that he left for the nation to continue to, the foundation that he laid for the disciples and apostles to continue to build on. He says, and the tribulation, our people, as a people, even if we're in righteousness in our kingdom, it wasn't like it was just all, gumdrops, lollipops, and skipping through fields. Every time we are in, righteousness and we are established in our land, we're hated, right? We have enemies, typically that surround us and are always waiting for an opportunity to destroy us. Enemies that understand our history better than us in most cases. Enemies that know our laws. Enemies that understand our customs. And enemies that understand the correlation between our righteousness and the assistance, the divine intervention that we get from the Most High God. He said, I know thy works and tribulation and poverty. Not very many of our people are in good positions spiritually or physically, right? It says, but thou art rich, speaking of the Spirit. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Right? Let's go to Revelation. Stay in Revelation. Let's flip over to 3 and 9. Behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews and are not, but do lie. Behold, I will make them to come and worship before thy feet, and to know that I have loved thee. So, it's stated and reiterated, there's a blasphemy. Let's get that as well. The act or offense of speaking sacrilegiously about God or sacred things. When, not first and foremost, take it as far as who we are today, right? We call ourselves African Americans, Native Americans, Mexicans, Filipinos, all the different, bywords and proverbs that we go through, all these different countries, all these different sayings. And he says there's a blasphemy or of them that say they are Jews. Not only do they not speak well of us now without even calling ourselves Jews, but it's an insult to the Most High for them to call themselves Jews. How are you, the holy people of the Lord? How are you, the holy people, the apple of his eye? How are you, the chosen, and your people have only been around claiming to be Jews for a couple hundred years at most? More like probably really popular within the last 150. You're not keeping the law according to what's written in the Bible. You have practices and books that speak against Christ and the law. The prophecies say once Israel returns into our land, there would be no more war. The kingdom would be established. So who then are these people? And why is it mentioned multiple times in the scriptures that there's a blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not? And then he goes even further to say, but these are of the synagogue of Satan. That's the pinnacle of wickedness. That's the closest you could get to the adversary himself. Let's go from there. Let's go to Daniel chapter 9. So let's find out. Matter of fact, we're going to stay in the scriptures for just a quick moment, and then we're going to get into history, and a lot of it is going to be history. But let's look at this for a moment. Daniel chapter 9 and verse 7. O Lord, righteousness belongeth unto thee, but unto us confusion of faces, as at this day, to the men of Judah and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and unto all Israel that are near and that are far off, through all the countries whither thou hast driven them, because of their trespass that they have trespassed against thee. First and foremost, and keep in mind, this was during the time of Daniel. He's saying we have confusion of faces. How much more now? How many more, or how many doctrines and beliefs are there amongst the children of Israel as to who we are? Some people are black. Some people call themselves African American. Some people call themselves Negro. Some people call themselves Nubian. Some people call themselves the original man. Some people call themselves Gentiles. And that's just amongst so-called black people. Let alone the so-called Latino, the Native American, and all the other countries where our people are scattered. We're confused. Okay, is that one of us? Is it right? But then he says, but they are driven afar off through all the countries whither thou hast driven them, because of their trespass that they have trespassed against thee. The Bible speaks many times of judgment. Judgment specifically given to the children of Israel via curses on account of our disobedience. Curses that we still have to live with and endure till this day, right? Till this day, we're still living out the punishment of our forefathers so long ago because of the covenant that we entered into. There was a good, I'm not going to say the good and the bad, because the whole covenant was righteous and it was good, but there was a reward and a judgment. There's a reward and a judgment based on how we choose to behave ourselves. So that's another big factor as to how we identify the Jews. Let's go from there. Let's go to Deuteronomy 28. Deuteronomy chapter 28 is a staple and a huge part of the foundation of understanding who we are as a people and understanding what people call the Israelite doctrine. And the reason why is because in our judgment, you get identifying factors. Deuteronomy chapter 28, matter of fact, before I even get there, let's go to Amos chapter 3 real fast. We're going to come back to Deuteronomy 28, but let's go to Amos 3. Amos 3, we're going to start at verse 1 and read 1 and 2. Hear this word that the Lord hath spoken against you, O children of Israel, against the whole family which I brought up from the land of Egypt, saying, you only have I known of all the families of the earth. Therefore I will punish you for all your iniquities. The Most High made a declaration, and this isn't the only declaration, saying, you are my people and I will be your God. I will establish my covenant with you and your descendants after you. I will establish my name in Jacob. Here's my people. I will be your God forever, right? And he says, and I will punish you for all your iniquities. You're the only one that I know. I'm not dealing with every nation the way that I'm dealing with y'all. So there's a judgment, right? And that's one of the ways that you understand that the Most High is dealing with us. And you want to take it a step further, from whom he loveth, from whom he loveth, he what? Chasteneth. Deuteronomy 28, let's start at verse 1. And it shall come to pass, if thou shalt hearken diligently unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe and to do all his commandments, which I command thee this day, that the Lord thy God will set thee on high above all nations of the earth. If you read Deuteronomy 1 and 1, it says, these be all the words that Moses spake to Israel on this side of Jordan. God offered the children of Israel an ultimatum. If you keep the commandments and you abide in righteousness, he said, I will set thee above all nations on the earth. The next verses are important because these are all the things that we stand to gain even before the kingdom on this earth had we simply been obedient. Unfortunately, as we can see just from our living conditions alone, as well as all the other things that we experience and go through in this life, we didn't keep the commandments and weren't obedient. So there's a flip side. Verse 15. But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. That's the flip side. If you are not obedient, then I'm going to have to curse you. Just as much as I wanted to bless you, I'm going to have to give you that many more problems. So for all of this, right, you can read literally from 16 through 68. It's all just curses. Let me get one in particular. You know what? I might get a couple. I'm going to get, start off with 23. And thy heaven that is over thy head shall be brass, and the earth that is under thee shall be iron. So you ever heard the term stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? Difficult. Our lives are difficult, from the things that we have to endure, the things that we are expected to accomplish. the obstacles that are set before us, the other nations coming together, rallying together to be able to create plans and orchestrate our destruction. It's a lot of things that we have to endure and that we experience just from being Israel. Verse 32. Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long, and there shall be no might in thine hand. You see this with the education system. You see this with prison. You see this just off the fact that so many people are working 40, 50, 60 hours a week to be able to survive, and you don't have the time to raise your children. Now, as we're going through these curses, does this sound like any other race of people besides the so-called Negro, Latino, Native American, the different proverbs and bywords? Does this sound like the Jewish race? Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people. If they have, and they're notorious for having their own communities, isolated police forces, security, and all these, how have they experienced the curses that God said he would put upon his people? Where has this happened? Let's not, and we gonna, that people are always gonna try and tie in the Holocaust, but let's explain this. Verse 68. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships. If you go to Exodus 20:2, Egypt is just meaning the house of bondage. So the Lord shall bring thee into bondage again with ships. By the way whereof I spake unto thee, thou shalt see it no more again. So once we go into captivity via ships, we're not going to see our land again. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. Nobody's going to save us. Nobody's going to redeem us. We were very much so bought and sold. But who has been able to come and redeem us, right? Who has been able to come and save our people? So with that being said, I'm going to be heavily going into this book. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to put together some of the sources that I had, but we're going to be talking about the 13th tribe and what is known as the Khazarian Empire and the Khazar people. This book is by Arthur Koestler, and it says, this book traces the history of the ancient Khazar Empire, a major but almost forgotten power in Eastern Europe, which has in the Dark Ages become converted to Judaism. Khazaria was finally wiped out by the forces of Genghis Khan, but evidence indicates that the Khazars themselves migrated to Poland and formed the cradle of Western Jewry. Let's talk about it. So, this book is not expensive. It's like a $20 book, maybe a $7 if you go with the Kindle version. If you are able to follow along, that's great. I wasn't able to, copy and paste to be able to put it up to display it. But if you can listen to the words, I am going to be citing the pages as well if you're able to follow along. Starting off with page 1. About the time when Charlemagne was crowned Emperor of the West, this is page 1 of Rise, page 1, section 1. About the time when Charlemagne was crowned Emperor of the West, the eastern confines of Europe, between the Caucasus and the Volga, were ruled by a Jewish state known as the Khazar Empire. At the peak of its power, from the 7th to the 10th centuries AD, it played a significant part in shaping the destinies of medieval and consequently of modern Europe. So, interestingly enough, right? Let me see, I just want to... Let me see. pull that up in a minute. But let's go from there. So this was a empire between the Caucasus and the Volga. So who are we talking about? We're talking about those of the descendants of the Caucasus Mountains, the Caucasian, right? And then it said that they ended up migrating after the collapse of the empire and influencing medieval and modern Europe. All right. The next page, for whatever reason, it goes from 1 to 15. So the next is from page 14. Let me see. So, also just as a basic backstory of history, since this time, this people, the Khazarians and the Arabs, have been at war, right? It's mentioned all throughout this book. It's mentioned, we actually talked about it last week, talking about Zionism and the Balfour Declaration, how there was massive wars between the Arabs and Palestinians, as they're called today, on account of the Balfour Declaration, on account of the doctrine of Zionism, which is very similar to Manifest Destiny, essentially saying that the Jewish people needed somewhere in the world that they would have a centralized place in order for them to foundate themselves as a nation. And so they allocated land from modern-day Israel, or modern-day Palestine, Israel, after the fall of the Ottoman Empire. And when the Great Britain had a lot of authority and power because they went to war and defeated the Ottoman Empire, they allotted that land and that space to the Jewish people and came out with a declaration called the Balfour Declaration, publicly supporting their migration into modern-day Israel, modern-day Palestine. It says, the wars of the Arabs and the Khazars, which lasted more than 100 years, though little known, have thus considerable historic importance. Dropping down to the third paragraph. Ironically, the last battle in the war, AD 737, ended in a Khazar defeat. But by that time, the impetus of the Muslim holy war was spent, the caliphate was rocked by internal dissensions, and the Arab invaders retraced their steps across the Caucasus without having gained a permanent foothold in the north, whereas the Khazars became more powerful than they had previously been. So, during this time, even though they had suffered defeats, because there was no one to actually uproot them, they became even more powerful. Page 15. I'm actually going to read a little bit before that so that this makes sense. Oh no, this is actually a continuation. A few years later, probably 740 AD, the king, his court, and the military ruling class embraced the Jewish faith. So you're going to see a number of different times, because this book isn't just, a scholar that wrote a book. He has a lot of references to other books that he uses as well. And a lot of them, you have historians, you have history books prior to this, history books written in the early 1900s, as well as sites and references from as early as 1100 and 700 that are mentioning the conversion to Judaism of the Khazarian Empire, which is super important. Why is that super important? Well, for one, you can't just convert to Judaism. In the scriptures, it was a particular people that the Most High God was dealing with. Let's go from there. Let's go real quick to Deuteronomy 7 and 6. Get two quick scriptures. Deuteronomy 7 and 6, it says, for thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God. So you are a set apart people unto the Lord. The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself above all people that are upon the face of the earth. Before we even get into that, let's go to 1 Chronicles. It's either first or second. First Chronicles 17:22. It says, "For thy people Israel didst thou make thine own people forever, and thou, Lord, becamest their God." Between just those two verses, you see that there is a claiming, right? There is an actual possession that is taken of the children of Israel by God, right? By God. And he says, I'm also going to be your God. You're going to be a special people above all other people. So when people talk about converting to Judaism, you can't. Well, you can convert to Judaism, but you can't convert to being a Jew. We're talking about a lineage. We're talking about a people. We're talking about a specific race. So when you hear about converts to Judaism, that doesn't magically make them Jews. That means that they practice some, or maybe even most, of the practices of what it means, or of the law of the Jews, but you couldn't have just magically become a Jew. And that's the difference between the truth of the scriptures versus all other religions and doctrines. You could wake up tomorrow and say, I'm going to be Christian, wake up on Friday and say, I'm going to be an atheist, and wake up on the Sabbath and say, you know what, I'm back to being Christian. You can wake up tomorrow and convert to any number of religions. Anyone can, of any race. Most religions allow anyone to enter into their religion. That's not so with the Bible. That's not so with the children of Israel. That's why he specifies the children of Israel. The children of this particular man is who I'm speaking to, who I'm dealing with, who these laws are for. You can't change your pedigree. You can't change your ethnicity, right? So we're going to hear a lot about the conversion of this people to the Jewish faith and Judaism. It says, where were we? Our investigations cannot go into problems pertaining to the history of ideas, but we must call the reader's attention to the matter of the Khazar kingdom's state religion. It was the Jewish faith which became the official religion of the ruling strata of society. This literally happened because there was already Jewish influence, right? There was already, all nations know of the scriptures. All nations know of the stories. And for the most part, they, even to this day, as we're learning and waking up to our history, they were already born or taught from an early age who we are. It says, needless to say, the acceptance of the Jewish faith as the state religion of an ethnically non-Jewish people could be the subject of interesting speculations. So it's understood that whoever these people are, the Khazars, they're not Jewish. They weren't born Jews. They're not even Gentiles according to what the Bible speaks of. Those were still Jews that were just in other countries and other regions, unaware of the fact that they were Israelites. This people is not either of those, right? And it says, we shall, however, confine ourselves to the remark that this official conversion and defiance of Christian proselytizing by Byzantium, the Muslim influence from the East, and in spite of the political pressure of these two powers, to a religion which had no support from any political power, but was persecuted by nearly all, has come as a surprise to all historians concerned with the Khazars, and cannot be considered as accidental, but must be regarded as a sign of the independent policy pursued by that kingdom. So during these times, right, you're talking about the holy wars, you're talking about conquests, you're talking about Muslims and Christians going to war pretty constantly for influence and for power over the known world at this time, right? From here all the way up until, I believe, the 10th century, right? Huge influence, both of which are gaining a lot of traction, gaining ground, gaining a lot of support, and gaining massive amounts of influence. So there was actually a meeting of sorts with the Khazarian king. I'm not sure if I mentioned that within the references, but he had a Muslim He had a Christian, and then he had a Jew already there with him, that they were all basically presenting their claims, right? Here's why you should be Christian. No, by Allah, here's why you should be Muslim. No, this is the religion of the Jews, right? From there, let's go to page 19. Still in section 1, page 19. Okay, so we start to get physical descriptions, and we start to get mannerisms, right? Page 19, section 3. Their land is cold and wet. Accordingly, their complexions are white, their eyes blue, their hair flowing and predominantly reddish, their bodies large and their natures cold. Their general aspect is wild. This is his description of the Khazars. You had a mixture of Turks. You had a mixture of, I believe, I want to say the first Ottomans. You had just kind of like an amalgamation of a few different races in the Khazarian Empire. And this was the decision that not only started to unify the Khazarian Empire under one religion, but started to have them identify as Jewish. Stay within this section. We're going to flip over to page 22, section 4. Let me see. Second paragraph. One of the earliest factual references to the Khazars occurs in a Syriac chronicle by Zechariah Retior. And he simply was, let me make sure I got the right one. It was actually written by an anonymous compiler and named after an earlier Greek historian whose work is summarized in the compilation. So it says, dating from the middle of the 6th century. It mentions the Khazars in a list of people who inhabit the region of the Caucasus. So even when we're talking about the land of Israel, these people were not dwelling in the land of Israel. These people cannot trace their lineage back to the land of Israel. These people were dwelling in the Caucasus Mountains. That's gonna be said a lot. Let's flip over. Matter of fact, let me see if this. There's a lot of valuable information in this book, though. Let's flip over, same section, page 34. From the chronological point of view, the next event to be discussed should be the conversion of the Khazars to Judaism around 740 AD. But to see that remarkable event in its proper perspective, one should have at least some sketchy idea of the habits, customs, and everyday life among the Khazars prior to the conversions. Let me see. Oh, okay, so actually it is mentioned here. So here's essentially how this happened, and summed up, right? It says this is section, the first book, section 9, paragraph 3. The court was that of the Caliph al-Maqdir, and the diplomatic mission traveled from Baghdad through Persia and Bukhara to the land of the Volga Bulgars. The official pretext for this grandiose expedition was a letter of invitation from the Bulgar king, who asked the Caliph for religious instructors to convert his people to Islam. Oh, I see the screen is frozen. Un momento, por favor. There we go. Salakia, Israel. But so there was an invitation made essentially for the powers of that time to come and say, state your claim, right? State your cause. Why should we be Muslim? Why should we be Christian? Why should we be Jewish? It says, and to build him a fortress which would enable him to defy his overlord, the king of the Khazars. The invitation, which no doubt prearranged by earlier diplomatic contacts, also provided an opportunity to create goodwill among the various Turkish tribes inhabiting territories through which The mission had to pass by preaching the message of the Quran and distributing huge amounts of gold bakshish. So it was a lot of bribery. But that was for Muslims, right? That was for them to convert to Islam. Page 37. Ooh, I got to actually read a little bit of 36 for this to make sense. A couple of things. Okay, so we're going to start off page 36, first paragraph. About the third sentence. It says, here they hibernated for 3 months because of the intense cold, a factor which looms large in many Arab travelers' tales. You can actually read the tales that the Arab historians and travelers are writing about. It says, around the middle of February, the thaw set in. The mission arranged to join a mighty caravan of 5,000 men and 3,000 pack animals to cross the northern steeps, and bought the necessary supplies, camels, skin boats made of camel hides for crossing rivers, bread, millet, and spiced meat for 3 months. The natives warned them about the even more frightful cold in the north and advised them what clothes to wear. It says, Ibn Fadlan, the fastidious Arab, liked neither the climate nor the people of excuse me, these are some wild words. Khwarizm, Khwarizm. Khwarizm. They are, so this is his actual account, right? This is what he's actually writing about the people of the Khazarian Empire. They are, in respect of their language and constitution, the most repulsive of men. Their language is like the chatter of starlings. At a day's journey, there is a village called Ard-Kwa, whose inhabitants are called Kardals. Their language sounds entirely like the croaking of frogs. All right? Chosen people of God, so they say, right? Page 38. Still an account, right? Listen to this. They are nomads and have houses of felt. They stay for a while in one place and then move on. One can see their tents dispersed here and there all over the place according to nomadic custom. Although they lead a hard life, they behave like donkeys that have lost their way. They have no religion which would link them to God, nor are they guided by reason. They do not worship anything. Right? So this is prior to the convert to Judaism. This is the type of people that the Khazars were. Instead, they called their headmen lords. The sexual mores of the Gus and other tribes were a remarkable mixture of liberalism and savagery. Their women wear no veils in the presence of their men or strangers, nor do the women cover any parts of their bodies in the presence of people. As we conversed, the woman uncovered her private parts and scratched them, and we all saw it. Thereupon we covered our faces and said, "May God forgive me." The husband laughed and said to the interpreter, "Tell them we uncover it in your presence so that you may see and restrain yourselves, because it cannot be attained. This is better than when it is covered up and yet attainable. Adultery is alien to them, yet when they discover that someone is an adulterer, they split him in two halves. This they do by bringing together the branches of two trees, tie him to the branches, and then let both trees go, so that the man tied to them is torn in two." Yeah. Same section, page 39. Matter of fact, let me see. Oh, page 39, section 2. A custom, matter of fact, no, I'm going to read up from the top. As for homosexuality, which in Arab countries was taken as a matter of course, Ibn Fadlan says it is regarded by the Turks as a terrible sin. So he's talking about the Turks because these are one of the predominant peoples of the Khazarian Empire. But in the only episode he relates to prove his point, the seducer of a beardless youth gets away with a fine of 400 sheep. Who does that sound like? Right? So it says a beardless youth, meaning a minor, a young man that's so young he doesn't even have a beard. If a seducer does go into a young man like that, he's fined with 400 sheep. This was their custom. Accustomed to the splendid baths of Baghdad, our traveler could not get over the dirtiness of the Turks. The Ghus do not wash themselves after defecating or urinating, nor do they bathe after seminal pollution or any other occasions. Dropping down, it says, they saw that his underclothes were fraying apart from dirt, for it is their custom never to take off the garment they wear close to their bodies until it disintegrates. Another Turkish tribe, the Bashkirs, shave their beards and eat their lice. They search the folds of their undergarments and crack the lice with their teeth. Let's go over to page 59. Yeah, super gross. Super gross. So these are the early stages of the Khazarian Empire prior to their convert to Judaism. This is the people dwelling in the Caucasus Mountains that converted to Judaism and from there end up becoming the Jewish race. This is the origins of this people. Page 59, right? And this is all according to historians. This is all according to accounts by Arab travelers at that time. This isn't like some, somebody of us modern day wrote this book. No, these are real life instances of what they witnessed amongst these people. Page 59. Sorry, I'm trying to get this book cover back on here. Page 59. The apparent logic of the decision is, of course, due to deceptive clarity and hindsight. Salakia, how is this going to make sense? Reading up above that. At the same time, their intimate contacts with Byzantium and the Caliphate had taught the Khazars that their primitive shamanism was not only barbaric and outdated compared to the great monotheistic creeds, but also unable to confer on the leaders the spiritual and legal authority which the rulers of the two theocratic world powers, the Caliph and the Emperor, enjoyed. So once these people started having contact with the outside world, they realized, people wash themselves. People don't eat their lice, and they're washing themselves after they poop and after sex. And they're being invited by Muslim and treated by Muslim and by Christian authorities to essentially join in their cause. And the king of the Khazars is starting to realize, okay, well, for one, we have an outdated lifestyle, shamanism, right? But on top of that, he was like, man, because we're a nomadic people and everybody's scattered and everybody kind of does their own thing, he's not able to wield the power of an actual king or a ruler. He's not able to actually gather all his people together the way that Christians and Muslims were able to do in their kingdoms, right? So it became strategic. It says, yet the conversion to either creed would have meant submission, the end of independence, and thus would have defeated its purpose. What could have been more logical than to embrace a third creed, which was uncommitted towards either of the two, yet represented the vulnerable foundation of both? The apparent logic of the decision is, of course, due to the deceptive clarity of hindsight. In reality, the conversion to Judaism required an act of genius. It says, yet both the Arab and Hebrew sources on the history of the conversion, however, varied in detail, point to a line of reasoning as indicated above. To quote Berry once more, to embrace Mohammedanism would have made him the spiritual dependent of the caliphs, who attempted to press their faith on the Khazars, and in Christianity lay the danger of his becoming an ecclesiastical vassal of the Roman Empire. So he looked to his left and he looked to his right. He said, on the left, I got the Muslims, and they're just coming in passing out gold. They're just super wealthy. Still the same case to this day. So he's looking and he's like, but if I go that way, I'm going to have to submit to everything that they decide or get cut off, and that's essentially going to cause him to lose his empire, whereas now he's able to, have somewhat of an empire. Then on the right is the Christians, but then he says, well, dang, if I join the Christian movement, I'm just going to be a vessel for, what did he say? The Roman Empire. So for the Pope, right? He's just going to have to join in their wars, fight their battles, and do the same thing that all the other Christians of that time were doing. Judaism was a reputable religion with sacred books, which both Christian and Mohammedan respected. It elevated him above the heathen barbarians and secured him against the interference of caliph or emperor. But he did not adopt, along with circumcision, the intolerance of the Jewish cult. He allowed the mass of his people to abide in their heathendom and worship their idols. So first and foremost, the origins of even their conversion wasn't like, oh man, we're filthy, disgusting savages. Let's really decide to make a change and start being more priest-like. He was like, how do I kind of get out of having to join their religion and having to join their religion? Maintain my power and not have to do the bidding of someone else. It was tactical, right? And he didn't force Judaism upon all of the people of his empire. He still, even though claiming, okay, we're a Jewish empire, it said he allowed them to abide in their heathendom and worship their idols. There wasn't a massive change in an immediate effect. Let me see. Oh, here's another important fact, something that he understood. It says, in fact, though the Khazars court, this is page 59, section 2 conversion, or I guess chapter 2 conversion, section 1, last paragraph of 59. Though the Khazars court conversion was no doubt politically motivated, it would still be absurd to imagine that they embraced overnight, blindly, a religion whose tenets were unknown to them. In fact, however, they had been well acquainted with Jews and their religious observances for at least a century before the conversion. So it wasn't like they didn't know who the Jews were. It wasn't like they didn't understand the practices. It wasn't like this was some shock. They already understood these things and knew a little bit about Jewish customs and the holy days, right? The feast days. Stay in the same section, page 60. The year of the Hagera, 332, AD 934, the year of the Hagera, 332, 933, 943, and 944 AD, has converted the Jews in his kingdom to Christianity by coercion. Thus, many Jews took flight from the country of the Greeks to Khazaria. So, who else is coming to join the party? We already got the Turks in here. You already got, the Turks, the Gauls, what are they called? The Moguls, Moguls, a bunch of different people, mind you, right? But now, who's coming to join the party? Oh, look at that. It's the Greeks coming to the Caucasus Mountains to join the Khazarian Empire and their new conversion to Judaism. Right? Where are we? Let's go page 63, same section. Page 63, section 2, second paragraph. It says, Al-Masudi's account of the Jewish role in Khazaria, quoted early on, ends with a reference to a previous work of his in which he gave a description of those circumstances. That previous work of Masudi's is lost, but there exist two accounts which are based on the lost book. The first, by Damansky, written in 1327, reiterates that at the time of Harun al-Rashid, the Byzantine emperor forced the Jews to immigrate. These immigrations came to the Khazar country, where they found an intelligent but uneducated race to whom they offered their religion. The natives found it better than their own and accepted it. Because it wasn't all just at once. It wasn't all just one foul swoop. You had a whole bunch of these people that were nomadic. So it wasn't even like they were all in the same place at the same time. They were also, because they were nomadic, they didn't have a form of government as we know it. It was technically a monarchy, but it functioned as a democracy. Sounds a lot like the kingdoms that we see today. But even more divided, because it wasn't even like they were broken off into city-states. They kind of just migrated as they saw fit. So it was a gradual conversion, an adding of other peoples, right? An adding of customs. And initially, there was a lot of, what do you call that? Paganism. There was a lot of idol worship still. It was a gradual process for them to convert. Where are we at? We're at 63. Let's jump over to page 66. Let me see if I need any of this. This is kind of important. It says, page 64, second paragraph. The Arab historian certainly had a gift for sugaring the pill. Had the Muslim scholar been able to participate in the debate, he would have fallen into the same trap as the bishop, for both accepted the truth of the Old Testament, whereas the upholders of the New Testament and of the Quran were each outvoted 2-1. Dropping down to the last paragraph. The story also implies, as Burry has pointed out, that Jewish influence at the Khazar court must already have been strong before the formal conversion. For the bishop, which is, this is in Christianity, and the Muslim scholar have to be sent for, whereas the Jew is already with him, the king. So already quite a bit of influence as it was. Here's a little bit of how the story started to adapt, right? So in the scriptures, you either were a Jew or you weren't. You were either an Israelite or you weren't. And so if, let's just say, 3 or 4 generations, because I don't think you're supposed to count yourself. As these people are converting, let's just say it's their great-grandfather, right? So you got me, my father, my grandfather, then my great-grandfather. I've never actually met either of my great-grandfathers. Most people probably haven't because they're significantly older, right? It's that simple to rewrite history. In 3 generations, you could very easily take a custom, a belief system, a religion, and impose it upon a people, and the great-grandson of a man will say, well, this is who we are. My great-grandfather passed it to my grandfather, he passed it to my father passed it to me. You would automatically assume that it goes back as early as, history itself, as time itself, right? But here's some of how the theology, the ideals, and the stories began to be integrated into this gradual conversion. Page 66, second paragraph. According to his own account, Hasdai first heard of the existence of an independent Jewish kingdom from some merchant traders from Khorasan in Persia, but he doubted the truth of their story. So he's hearing, even though he's in Khazari or Khazarim, starting to integrate and practice Judaism, he's just now hearing about the actual Jews themselves randomly from a merchant that, he's, doing business in a port. He's doing trade, and he hears from a merchant, yeah, there's actual Jews. They're an autonomous state. They live separate from everybody. So he's like, oh, wait a minute, right? He's hearing that this is an actual people. Later, he questioned the members of a Byzantine diplomatic mission to Cordoba, and they confirmed the merchant's account, contributing a considerable amount of factual detail about the Khazar kingdom, including the name Joseph of its present king. Thereupon, Hasdai decided to send couriers with a letter to King Joseph. So, they knew about the Jews. This was the Khazarian kingdom that they're hearing about. So he's writing to the Khazars saying, oh, I hear that you guys are an autonomous Jewish state, right? The letter, which will be discussed in more detail later on, contains a list of questions about the Khazar state, its people, method of government, armed forces, and so on, including an inquiry, listen to this, including an inquiry to which of the 12 tribes Joseph belonged. Because this is the king of the Khazars, and he's claiming we're Jewish. So another man who actually knows of the Jews, who understands the Jews are in Israel, they're an autonomous state. He's hearing about another autonomous state of Jewish, and he's inquiring like, who are y'all? What people are you? What's your language? How many are you? Do you have a military? Do you have a culture? Do you have a religion? What is this? And then he asks him the real important question, because he understood something about the Jews. He's like, well, there's only 12 tribes. Y'all way over. Which of these tribes are you from? This seems to indicate that Hasdai thought the Jewish Khazars to hail from Palestine, as the Spanish Jews did, and perhaps even to represent one of the lost tribes. Joseph, not being of Jewish descent, belonged to, of course, none of the tribes. In his reply to Hasdai, he provides, as we shall see, a genealogy of a different kind, but his main concern is to give Hasdai a detailed, if legendary, account to the conversion which took place 2 centuries earlier, and the circumstances that led to it. So this is 200 years later, after the segments that we were just reading. We just talked about it. It's only like 3 generations. You can create a history. I would be fully convinced of just about anything if I was raised believing it. Most people would, probably without question. If you get told, all right, son, we're from across an ocean and we've always been whale hunters. As a child, you're going to believe that. And then, I mean, don't let them have a picture or some type of record to really validate what you're talking about. You're just going to go with it. The same thing goes where these people have been now accepting and practicing Judaism, establishing themselves as an actual kingdom, gravitating away more so from being nomadic and actually having a governing authority of religion being Judaism. Of course, when they're asked about their tribes, they're not actually Jews, so they can't give record. It says Joseph's narrative starts with a eulogy of his ancestor, King Bulin, a great conqueror and a wise man who drove out the sorcerers and idolaters from his land. Also, clearly not really how it happened, right? Initially, the king allowed them to practice their idolatry. He allowed them to practice, what do you call that? Their paganism, right? It says he would bless, Subsequently, an angel, look at this. An angel appeared to King Bulin in his dreams, exhorting him to worship the only true God, and promising that in exchange, he would bless and multiply Bulin's offspring and deliver his enemies into his hand, and make his kingdom last to the end of the world. Listen, this, of course, is inspired by the story of the covenant in Genesis 17, and it implies that the Khazars too claim the status of a chosen race who made their own covenant with the Lord. These are stories. But if it's passed from generation to generation for the past 200 years, anyone who's raised being taught that from their fathers who were taught from their fathers and so on, oh, it's solidified. This is believed to be actual history at this point, right? So they basically began to look into the scriptures for inspiration and create their own versions of the stories. And instead of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he believes King Bulin, and then his son, and so on, all the way down to the current king, which was King Joseph, right? It says, no, matter of fact, from there, let's go to page 71. Page 71, the third opening from the top, third paragraph from the top. It says, I'm going to read the second paragraph. Having thus described in detail how this letter came to be written and his efforts to have it delivered, Hasdai proceeds to ask a series of direct questions which reflect his avidity for more information about every aspect of the Khazar land, from its geography to its rites in observing the Sabbath. So look at this. After all this time, they're keeping Jewish law. They're keeping Sabbaths. They're observing feasts. They have gravitated away from paganism, and they're really starting to believe that they are the Jews. Because again, you can't read this Bible and you keep seeing the children of Israel and think that it's just some random people, or it could be anybody. So because they were passed this history from generation to generation, they started to believe themselves Jews. They started to believe themselves the chosen. They started to believe these stories to be their own, right? The concluding passage in Hasdai's letter strikes a note quite different from that of its opening paragraphs. I feel the urge to know the truth, whether there is really a place on this earth where harassed Israel can rule itself, where it is subject to nobody. So now, not only do these people, because they're practicing Judaism and they have these stories that they believe are theirs, whatever they experience, they're like, oh, we've always gone through this. Oh, we've always been persecuted. Not quite. But look at how they started to speak. Look at what they started to understand, what they started to believe. You're 200 years past the conversion. You got all types of mythology. You got all types of origin stories. You got all types of forefathers being mentioned. And now these people believe that God is dealing with them on an individual level, and that an angel went to his great, however many great forefather and spoke to him, telling him to follow God, the God of this Bible, who wants nothing to do with this people. It says, if I were to know that this is indeed the case, I would not hesitate to forsake all honors, to resign my high office, to abandon my family, and to travel over mountains and plains, over land and water, until I arrived at the place where my Lord, the Jewish king, rules. And I also have one more request, to be informed whether you have any knowledge of the possible date of the final miracle, the coming of the Messiah, which, wandering from country to country, we are awaiting. So even if you hear, Jewish people say today, oh, we've been kicked out of every country. Well, I mean, there was some history behind it. That has happened, but not just because they were Jewish, not because of the persecution of the doctrine that they kept. First and foremost, they're not even in Israel at this point, right? It says, dishonored and humiliated in our dispersion, we have to listen in silence to those who say, every nation has its own land, and you alone possess not even a shadow of a country on this earth. This, I believe, to be the spark and the origin of the doctrine of Zionism. That right there. The fact that they're looking to govern themselves, the fact that the king is saying, we're the chosen people, God is rolling with us, we have all these stories, we believe, our forefathers were chosen, but yet we don't have a land. That's where essentially Zionism originates from, is the desire to gather all the Jewish people in one place so that they can establish some level of autonomy. We're almost done. Let's go to page 74. It says, thus the Judaization of the Khazars was a gradual process which, triggered off by political expediency, slowly penetrated into the deeper strata of their minds and eventually produced the messianism of their period of decline. Their religious commitment survived the collapse of their state and persisted, as we shall see, in the Khazar Jewish settlements, get this, of Russia and Poland. Jeez. Look at that. Russia and Poland. Where did these people migrate after their defeats? Oh, let's get it. Let's read about it. Talks about it. Page 79. Matter of fact, what section are we in now? This section is called Conversion. Or excuse me, this chapter is called Conversion. Section 8, paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It says, I'm actually going to read paragraph 5. This also applies to the famed German Jewish traveler. Excuse me. Rabbi Potachia of Ratisbon, who visited Eastern Europe and Western Asia between 1170 and 1185. His travelogue, Sabaib HaOlam, Journey Around the World, that's the name of it, was apparently written by a pupil, based on his notes or on dictation. It relates how shocked the good rabbi was by the primitive observances of the Khazar Jews north of the Crimea, which he attributed to their adherence to the Karaite heresy. And the Rabbi Potachia asked them, "Why do you not believe in the words of the sages, i.e. the Talmudists?" So you can see quite a bit has developed at this point, right? We're getting excerpts from pieces of history, some of these hundreds of years apart. You've got the Talmud, you've got the customs that are established, but you also, what we just read, the doctrine was deeply embedded in who they were as a people. They started to believe that they were, because again, I mean, wouldn't you believe if you like, yeah, your father came to you as a child, as a boy or as a little girl, this is who we are as a people. This is who we are. This is our history. This is as it was taught to me by my father, taught to him by his father, taught to him by his father, so on and so forth. You would be like, well, since the history or since the origin of man, this is who we've been. So by this point, the knowledge of their Khazar forefathers was pretty much lost. And I don't mean the knowledge as in, oh, they were experts in alchemy and things of that nature. They no longer have information. I mean the actual understanding of the origin of their people was lost. They, at this point, believe that they're Jews. They, at this point, have been adhering to Judaism for so long, that's how they track their lineage. That's what they believe themselves to be. Even though, back, one of the earlier excerpts that we wrote, they couldn't validate their tribes. The king couldn't validate his tribe. But he was only, I don't think he was even 200 years after the conversion. Or maybe he was exactly at 200 years. But he understood, oh, I don't know which tribe I'm from, but I could tell you how my forefathers, the Khazars, converted to Judaism. You know how many hundreds of years we are past that? They're probably not speaking of a Khazar anymore. They're not mentioning the name Khazar anymore. They don't have an understanding that there was ever even a conversion anymore. It is deeply embedded in the culture of their people. This is who we are. And the Rabbi Potachia asked them, "Why do you not believe in the words of the sages, i.e. the Talmudists?" They replied, "Because our fathers did not teach them to us. On the eve of the Sabbath, they cut all the bread which they eat on the Sabbath. They eat it in the dark and sit the whole day on one spot. Their prayers consist only of the Psalms." Look at that. Who teaches today? Because mind you, when a lot of our people come into the understanding or the realization that we're Israelites, a lot of people, before they have understanding of the customs of the scriptures, they immediately try to take on the customs of Judaism, saying, oh, well, if these are the Jews and I'm a Jew, then I must do what they're doing, right? But listen to this. It was this early that they were already observing the Sabbath as it is now. They are not doing anything. Do you not still see these people doing this to this day? Oh, we can't turn on the lights. It's the Sabbath. We can't drive anywhere. It's the Sabbath. We can't start the car. It's the Sabbath. They were doing this a long time before that. And so these customs, as far as those customs, they're super old within this people, right? Where are we at? We're at 79. Last excerpt. This is from section 3, Decline, page 94. Yeah, this will be the last section. Page 94. It says, the Khazar kingdom disintegrated and fell into pieces, from which the majority merged with other related peoples, and the minority, settling in Itil, I-T-I-L, lost its nationality and turned into a parasitic class with a Jewish coloration. The Russians never shunned the cultural achievements of the East, but from the Itil Khazars, the Russians took nothing. So, I am going to read a couple more, maybe one or two more. But this is where you see, even when they collapsed, they kind of migrated into other places, such as Poland, Russia, Italy, Spain. A lot of the places that you saw Jewish people residing prior to the Balfour Declaration and the immigration into Israel, or modern-day Palestine. So the same places. So once this Khazarian empire fell apart, these people migrated into similar peoples, related peoples, right? Kingdoms that weren't very far from them, cultures that weren't very, very different. And it's no different from what you see modern day, right? People are all advocating, oh, it's so messed up what Russia is doing to Ukraine. But literally like what, 40, 50 years ago, Ukraine was a part of Russia? But if you're 20 years old, 25, 30 years old, you were never around for the Iron Curtain to fall. And it seems like this is an invasion and it's so immoral and so messed up and you're taking away these people's culture. They are the same people. They even speak Russian, both of them. So if one of those kingdoms was to collapse, say, Ukraine, they would more than likely just migrate into regions that are local into related peoples. No different from what happened with the Khazarian Empire. Once they fell, they started migrating into related peoples. And keep in mind, this just goes to show how easily it is to have created this people, because all these places where they were the same places that they were prior to immigration and the Balfour Declaration and for prior to Zionism. This stuff is recent, but maybe, crazy enough, this is like our great-grandparents' age. Most people's grandparents probably born in anywhere between the late 20s, early 40s. I ain't gonna say most people, but if you're a little older, you probably, somewhere in that region, you probably have grandparents or great-grandparents. The Balfour Declaration, the creation of the region of Palestine, or modern day Palestine, or Israel, which belongs to the Jewish people according to that declaration, was back at that time. It was about 100 years ago. But if this is your great-grandparents' time and you're taught since then, those are the Jews, those are the Jews, those are the Jews, how easy is it to believe? That's why we believe it to this day. Well, okay, it's 3-4 generations back. This is all I know. It is that easy to rewrite history. I'm talking about 100 years. Everything could be completely different, right? Let me see. There was a specific part that I thought I had. Oh, maybe it's in fall. Okay, if I can't find it, yeah. It was basically another excerpt. We read it just a moment ago. Basically, just another thing that said that they migrated into Poland, into Spain, into these various different places. And then I want to read a quick slide from the Balfour Declaration lesson about 2 weeks ago, because where were these people coming from? Ba, 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 ba. Something I want real quick. Bear with me. This is the last thing, though. Oh, here it is. It says Zionism itself. This is the definition. Jewish nationalist movement with the goal of the creation and support of a Jewish national state in Palestine, the ancient homeland of the Jews. Zionism originated in Eastern and Central Europe in the latter part of the 19th century. Where did the Khazars migrate to? Europe, Russia, Poland. This is where they came from. This was the creation of the Jewish race. This is where that people, this is their history. This is how you can trace it back. Before they were calling themselves Jewish, this was the conversion of how they came to know themselves as the Jews of the Bible. So again, hopefully they don't jack the price of the book up, but as of right now, it's only like a $20 book. It's like $7 on Amazon for an audio book. A lot of good information in that book. A lot of excerpts from other books, a lot of history, a lot of historians that are being mentioned. It really paints the picture that this is not a biased perspective written by a scholar with a specific view, but there are so many different references, people, history, and excerpts, writings from historians, from scholars, from pupils, from prominent men that show that this was everybody's experience of the Khazars, right? So hopefully this has been informative. Hopefully this has been edifying. We appreciate you for tuning in, Israel. And with that, we say shalom.
If it wasn't for the Most High who was on my side, man, ain't no telling where I'd be.
Mr. Wilson would've known.
Can't nobody tell me nothing different. The Father's been good to me.
So good to me.
Yeah. Wave your hands if you feel me. I'm a witness. Yahweh's been good to me.
So good to me.
Every morning that I rise, I thank Yahweh that I'm living.